Is it worth spraying or not? Because besides the possible toxic effects of the sprays, it takes a lot of time to spray when you have more than one tree. I've had many of you say you never spray and your trees do fine. And I've many of you say that when you don't spray, your trees don't do well. I think a lot of it has to do with the variety we have, the type of year it's going to be, and other factors. To spray our mango trees or to not spray our mango trees? That is the question. Today we're going to be meeting Bobby, and Bobby has a bunch of fruit trees and a bunch of knowledge. And Bobby grows mango trees in a really high density situation, and he sprays his trees, and he has a lot of information about spraying trees. And we're going to ask him, for those of you that decide to spray your trees, how he does it, because Bobby's been quite successful in the sprays he uses and how he uses them, and he has a lot of experience. However, do we need to spray our trees? And can we do other things other than spraying our trees to help avoid the common reasons why we spray our trees? So this here is a white Pirie tree. This tree is very highly susceptible to something called powdery mildew. And this is one of the reasons people spray sulfur on their trees, so they don't get this powdery mildew. Then there are other diseases. The most common one is anthracnose. People spray their trees so they don't run into problems with anthracnose and lose the mangoes. The idea of spraying your trees is that you will get the most mangoes possible without losing mangoes. And that's the goal of growing trees to begin with, isn't it? However, I've observed people growing mangoes, spraying their trees so much, taking a lot of time and effort into spraying their trees for the best crop possible. But if it's still a bad season for diseases, the trees still suffer. However, if they didn't spray, those same trees would have almost no mangoes on them at all. Last year's a great example. Most people around the state of Florida in 2024 mango season didn't have mangoes at all. Alex at Tropical Acres Farms had a wonderful crop of mangoes. Alex sprays quite often. Many of these backyard growers don't spray and they didn't have any mangoes. However, myself and my neighbor had a very good amount of mangoes, and we are located near Alex, and we didn't spray much at all either. So how much of a difference does spray matter? Now, I do believe if Alex wouldn't have sprayed his trees, he wouldn't have had as a good of a crop, and he's a commercial grower and he needs it. However, in a commercial environment, you have hundreds of trees that are close together, and that, I believe, will make it more higher likely to spread disease. So if you have maybe one or two trees and you don't spray, I think you'll have a less of a chance of getting disease than is if you have a whole bunch of trees around. Reason being, or one of the reasons being, is if you have a lot of trees around, especially if they're touching, the trees aren't going to get as much airflow. So the question is it beneficial to spray, or can we get away with not spraying? And that depends on your situation. If you have a commercial orchard, I think, yes, spraying will be important if that's what you make a living on. However, if you have a backyard situation, you will get more mangoes if you spray your trees. And there are other things people are spraying as well. But we have to think about the health risk of spraying trees. Even if something is sprayed with organic sprays, are they still healthy for our bodies? And when I see people spraying their mango trees, especially when there's fruit on them, wearing toxic cover-upping suits or toxic suits, what are they, the chemical suits, because they don't want to get to spray anywhere on their body because it's so toxic. It can't be good for the mango. And if you eat that, it can't be good for you. Now, much of the sprays like powdery mildew are sprayed before mangoes even appear to help avoid getting it. Once you see it, it's too late. So this here on my white Pirie, it's too late to spray for powdery mildew because I already have it. But look what we see there. We see mangoes growing, breaking through the powdery mildew. So this tree, even though it has powdery mildew, looks like it's still going to get some mangoes this year. Now, if I would have sprayed this, maybe there would be a lot more mangoes. The only way to know is to try it and to experiment and see how it goes. Now, I'll be honest with you. This is the first year that I sprayed sulfur, and I didn't spray it much. I put maybe 3 applications, and maybe that's why this made a difference. I sprayed for powdery mildew. However, last year I did not spray sulfur at all on this tree or any of my trees, and my ice cream mango tree did pretty good last year. This year I had more than 1 flowering. The first flowering I sprayed, and I did pretty good. This year I didn't spray for the next crop, and I definitely got powdery mildew. So this answers one question. If you don't spray, you're definitely going to get a disease, and it most likely will affect how many mangoes you get. So that's one question answered. The other question is, how many mangoes do you need, and is it worth spraying or not? Because besides the possible toxic effects of the sprays, it takes a lot of time to spray when you have more than 1 tree. So that's that. Now, let's hear from Bobby if you decide to spray your trees, and let's see what Bobby has to say about how to spray the application of your trees. And here he goes. Here we are, everybody. This is Bobby, and here's his trees. This is his high density mango growing, and he's cut them back, and they're looking excellent. And his flowers are looking great. And I was just asking, when he sprays copper and sulfur, among other things. We're going to make a video another time on what exactly he does with his sprays. But tell us, do you spray copper and sulfur together at the same time?
I would not, because the tree can only absorb certain amount of minerals, because you know the stomatas are open in the morning and in the evening when the sun is a little low, and it can only absorb so much minerals. Otherwise, you're going to waste it. And the anthracnose spores are usually inside the panicle or in the leaves, and you need it to be absorbed in order to kill those and the spores. So best to do it separate. And sulfur is actually, I feel it's more important because of the powdery mildew and some mite problems. So, and sulfur is also better because it our soil is deficient in sulfur, and then it also can acidify the soil, both of which are important. Sulfur, I think I would spray at least 5 or 6 times a year, if not more.
And can you harm a tree by spraying too much sulfur or spraying at the wrong time?
Yeah. Sulfur is acidic. You don't want to. There is a certain. Just follow the label. There is a like 1 ounce per gallon or 2 ounce, 2 to 3 ounce.
And how often between spraying of sulfur would you do?
At least 2 weeks. But if you have a severe problem, like you get a lot of mites and a lot of powdery mildew, if your flowers are falling off, you could do it more often. And you can spray sulfur on open blooms. Actually, that's a good idea to spray sulfur on open blooms.
Okay, so now the copper. How long will you wait before spraying the copper after you spray the sulfur?
I would wait a little longer, because it's a little more toxic than sulfur is. Like high doses of copper can hurt the blooms as well as the tree. Sulfur wouldn't hurt the blooms.
So if you spray sulfur, how many days after would you spray the copper?
You can spray copper after 2-3 days.
But not the same day?
I would not spray the same day. At least wait a couple of days.
Is the same day or the next day?
I would not spray anything 2 consecutive days.
But if you spray it the same days, it's just like spraying it together in one application, right? Similar?
Not really. If you're spraying it at the same time, it's a little more, overwhelming for the tree.
All right, so you'd wait 2 or 3 days to spray copper. And when you spray copper, if you spray copper after the flowers open, before it sets fruit, does that affect the fruit?
So with the copper, you should spray it before the flowers open. And it's a good idea to spray copper after the rain, because the anthracnose starts right after the rain ended. You don't want to spray it when the rain will wash it off. You want to spray it when the rain is just died down. And if you have a heavy rain, it's a good idea to spray copper right after that. Same with sulfur, both.
What happens if you spray copper on open flowers?
They don't recommend it, but I have done it once or twice, and I did not see a negative effect.
Because not all the flowers open at the same time, so
True.
So you can't always spray. You're going to spray it all closed or all open, but they're not all open at the same time. So one way or the other, you're going to get copper on open flowers, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So once the mango's set, do you still need to spray sulfur or no?
once the mango is set,
Once you get the little mangoes,
then you can do one last batch of copper, because then you want to make sure you don't get those black spots or anthracnose. But you don't need sulfur at that point.
okay.
Sulfur is good idea while you have the blooms on, and copper is a good idea right before the blooms and when the mango is set.
Can you spray sulfur too early, or at that time you're just wasting the sulfur, or is it
No, you
an
can
issue?
spray sulfur. Sulfur has other benefits, not just powdery mildew. So you can spray sulfur. You can apply sulfur to the soil. That actually helps acidify it. And then
What is gypsum?
gypsum is calcium sulfate. It's pH neutral. It's calcium and sulfur. Uh, it's actually, so calcium is a little higher on the pH, so that kind of blocks some of the absorption. But sulfur is lower on pH, so they both.
So before somebody puts gypsum down, should they test their soil to make sure they need it, or could they put it? Should people put it down anyway?
Our soil is deficient in sulfur, but our water and soil have calcium. If you dig deeper, like no matter where you are in Florida, if you even in West Palm, it's not pure sand. If you dig deeper, you're going to find some marlite, a marl stone, which has sulfur. Which has calcium. Yeah, you don't need to put calcium really, but you just need to lower the pH, and that will allow you to absorb the calcium.
And what about people this year? Their blooms, if their blooms starting to die from anthracnose, if they see it dying, what do you recommend? If you come to this tree, which looks great, but you come to this tree and you start seeing some flowers dying and you figure out it's anthracnose, what would you recommend?
First of all, you need to actually figure out it is anthracnose or not, because it could be powdery mildew. So if you look at this,
I mean, you could tell a difference between powdery mildew and anthracnose.
This is in great shape, like it's all bright, and you could tell this has been. Yeah, so no powdery mildew on mine, no anthracnose on mine. But if it were anthracnose, I would spray copper. You could. I have sprayed copper on open blooms and not had a side effect.
Would you cut them out at all if the flowers were gone?
You could, but then if you have like so many trees, it's hard to do that.
Now, if you did cut it, where would you cut it? Would you just cut the whole affected part out?
But you know what? Because they could reflower again. So you sometimes have to be careful what you're doing. But yeah, all these have flowers, and this is, that just dried off. I think we need to give water.
So that's just dried, but
that's dry. I don't see any. Yeah, I don't see any powdery mildew or anthracnose. Yeah, sometimes they get. Sometimes I forget to water it, and then see, that's a good example. Yeah, if you go inside, there's all those trees have flowers, like heavy blooms, and the blooms look fresh. Like this is how your bloom should look like. This should be bright red. This should not have any black on it.
And if it's black, it could be anthracnose, it could be powdery mildew, or it could just be dried up.
Could be dried up due to water, and that happens a lot. Like lack of water is a lack of good water. I got to be specifying that. You might add like nasty water, and the tree is not drinking it.
So no matter how close they are, just make sure they're not touching, so they get full sun.
They're gonna, and the sun kinds of. If you have all the way around, the sun will find its way. It's going to get some sun at least. Even if it's on the shadier side, it's still going to get some sun.
But where it gets sun, you're going to get the most mangoes.
You're going to get the flowers there. I mean, you can walk the back of the tree, it still got flowers. Like, look at that. You're going to still get flower on the back side. So because it got the sun.
All right, everybody, that was Bobby, and he was talking about his trees in his high-density environment. Now he does it. Now look at this. I'm near a dot tree. This is my dot mango tree, and the mangoes look excellent. And this is flowers with no powdery mildew, and it's right next to, about 20 feet from my tree, with the powdery mildew on the white Pirie. Now, dot is a variety that's known not to be susceptible to white powdery mildew as much as the white Pirie, or powdery mildew as much as the white Pirie. Now, maybe that's another answer. If you're going to choose not to spray your trees, perhaps get trees that are not susceptible to powdery mildew and anthracnose. And there are certain trees, which Alex at Tropical Acres Farm calls insurance mangoes, that do better against powdery mildew than other trees. So when you're choosing your trees, there's so many things to consider if you really want to make sure you're going to get a decent crop. But also, some of my philosophies for life is I work real hard when I do what I have to do. But when I want to put myself in situations is to not have to work hard to get the benefit from what I need to get. So I want to work smarter, not necessarily harder, but I will work harder so I can understand what it means to work smarter. And so that's what I ultimately recommend. Here's another tree here is my pineapple pleasure. And this one is doing wonderful this year. So I started spraying trees this year. I sprayed with sulfur, and then I started to spray with copper. And then I realized, why am I going to do this? I'm going to go and try to see without spraying how I do. And my neighbor who's spraying quite often, I'm going to see how he does. And then during the season, I'm going to see if it made a difference in our trees. And again, you could be in the same lot or the same area, and one person could have a better experience than others with growing their trees. So those are just some things I consider, and plus what Bobby said. So put your comments and questions below. I've had many of you say you never spray and your trees do fine. And I have many of you say that when you don't spray, your trees don't do well. I think a lot of it has to do with the variety we have, the type of year it's going to be, and other factors. All right? I love your opinion. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. We teach each other. We learn with each other. So put your comments below. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, everybody, and keep growing.